Welcome to the NHL Wraparound Podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morin. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
And for many, the celebration has never stopped. Welcome to 1990 Forever, an NHL Wraparound Podcast 5-part series commemorating the 30th anniversary of the New York Rangers' 1994 Stanley Cup Championship, sponsored by Migrate and the Game 7 Group. Our first three shows covered the regular season and the Rangers' playoff triumphs over the Islanders, Capitals, and Devils. With one more hill to climb, Neil and I welcome left wing Adam Graves, defenseman Brian Leetch, and the captain, Mark Messier, to relive the conquering of the curse, the Stanley Cup Final against the Vancouver Canucks. It all begins after a word from our friends at Migrate.
From Howe to Hughes, from Bellevue to Bedard, we're your source for game-worn jerseys. Go to mygray.com, MEIGRAY.com to start your collection today. Get real. Get it from MyGray.
And welcome back to NHL Wraparound. This is 1990 Forever. This one will last a lifetime. It is our fourth episode in our 5-part series, and really pleased to be joined today by 52-goal scorer Adam Graves, the Conn Smythe Trophy winner Brian Leetch, and the captain Mark Messier joining Neil and me today. Everybody, welcome.
Great to be on with Vic and Neil. Good to see you guys.
Yeah. Likewise.
Good to see you three guys, the captain and the two assistants.
Well, we're certainly going to have a major climactic finish to this playoff run. And Mark, I want to actually start with you because in our last episode with Mike Richter and Stefan Matteau, we came off the epic series against New Jersey. And of course, you know, your heroics were certainly well documented in the Game 6 guarantee and then the incredible finish with Matteau in the double overtime. But as you now head into the final, and you've been through so many finals before, the expectancy against somewhat of a perceived lesser opponent, albeit the Vancouver Canucks had to win 3 straight overtime games to advance against Calgary in the opening round, but then they win in 10 total games against the Dallas Stars and the Toronto Maple Leafs to gain the final. So what's the message to the team heading into the final against the Canucks?
Well, I think that getting through New Jersey for us was a big step. We were tested in every way. We were playing against a team that was getting great goaltending. They had a tremendous defense. They were getting timely scoring up front, and they were incredibly well coached. We weren't playing poorly in that series. The Devils were playing better than us. We had to figure out a way to play better. We couldn't expect them to come back to us and win a game because of the Devils didn't perform. So it put a lot of pressure on the team to find a way to play better. But that gave us a lot of confidence going into the finals that we had another level to our game that we could get to. And when we found ourselves in a tough spot in the Vancouver series in the finals, we relied on those experiences in the conference final that let's just buckle down now and going into Game 7 that we could win a game. It gave us confidence that we could win that game. But I think for most of the guys on the team, When you're pushed to your max, when you're pushed to your limits, you don't know what you're capable of until that happens. And I think the New Jersey series for us as a team was probably the most important factor in us going on to be able to win a Stanley Cup, because it gave us that much needed confidence that when times got tough, we were able to dig down deeper and push harder.
Adam, you had been to the finals with Mark 4 years earlier. How was this experience serving you coming into this final in New York?
Yeah, kind of spoiled playing with the guy over my right shoulder, right? Yeah, for me, I was a young guy. I was, as Mark said, life is about learning, and experience is the greatest teacher. And certainly having that run and being a part of it in Edmonton. And for me, I'll never forget being in Edmonton and just thinking to myself as we navigated through the different rounds. And I do say this, and I won't go through the game, but Chicago Game 4 was easily my favorite game that number 11's ever played. But the ebbs and flows of playoffs, you're going to be pushed to find another level. And nothing is linear. There's always going to be ups and downs, but you have to continue to move in an upward trajectory, and not allow those dips to to end your playoff run. And for us in 1990, it was kind of unexpected. Maybe not unexpected amongst the core that had won 4 cups before that, but unexpected for a young guy like me having the opportunity and being able to watch, that experience and just the ability to come up with the big game when you need it. And for me, what it meant to dig down and play that physical style that Mark is so known for, Glenn Anderson, Kevin Lowe, guys that I obviously came to admire and respect, but just how tough you had to be and how tough you had to play. And toughness wasn't fighting. Toughness was winning battles, blocking shots, getting the lanes, taking a hit to make a play. And as you know, the closer you get to where you want to go, the tougher it gets. And for me, there was a real mental side of it, a real learning side of it for me in Edmonton. And then fast forward at 4 years later, that learning still had to continue. And on that run and playing against the Devils, who we all know, went on to win 3 cups after that, had fantastic team. And the only difference between us and them in the regular season was head to head. And certainly that series will go down as one of the greatest series ever. But also I think it'll go down as one of the toughest series. You had to battle for every inch of ice. And it was a heavy series. And going into Vancouver, if you looked at their lineup now and you saw the players on that team, they had a heck of a team. They had a heck of a team from the net out, Kurt McLean. So it was, 2 heavy series because both teams our last game against Vancouver, I think during the regular season that year was a battle. I think there was almost a 5-on-5 on the ice, and it was really physical. So there was for 2 teams that were as far apart as they were in different conferences, there was already a little bit of a rivalry there. So for us though, that journey and learning, as Mark had said, started for me in Edmonton and certainly it continued. It continued my entire career. You're always learning. So.
And Brian, this is now going to be your first final, and you are now playing with not only Mark and Adam, but several other Edmonton Oilers, such as Kevin Lowe and Glenn Anderson and Jeff Bukaboom that have come over. What is your expectation coming in to make this final step to win a Stanley Cup?
Well, I was already prepared because of having Mark there for a few years. I think you look at Adam, myself, and Mike Richter, 3 different positions, 3 different stages of our career, but having a leader like Mark, I think the 3 of us were like perfect examples of guys that wanted to win. And when someone like Mark, joins your team and you watch the way he goes about his business and prepares, and Adam, would always say to me, he goes, you watch, he's going to have a huge game today. Like whenever we need a big game, Mess would be there for that big game. But we were 3 perfect guys to fall in behind and to go. So then adding, the rest of them, Losey and, Book was already there. Like we were just building character as we went. So our expectations were high. We knew we had a good team. So getting to the finals, we expected to play well and we expected to win.
And Neil, this is the club that you have now assembled, and you have now gotten rid of the Devils in probably the most difficult series that you've ever sat through. Now, where's your confidence level as you head into the final with the gentlemen below?
Well, in my role, you sort of feed off of the players and what you see and what you hear. My confidence was extremely high because I knew we were going in to play Vancouver. And again, I'm from a different perspective than the players. I'm seeing it from the perspective of who the Canucks are, who our team is, who should win the series. Not much different than I do now in watching the NHL and figuring out who should win, who shouldn't win. And so with our team, I knew we had the better players. They had a good team, and no disrespect to them whatsoever, but they couldn't compare to the team that we had. And I knew that going in. And so my confidence was very high. But again, all you do is sit upstairs and eat your popcorn and hope. That's all you can do when you're in this role.
So the series begins in New York, and guys have a 2-1 lead late. And for the third time in 8 games, Rangers give up a goal in the last minute of regulation time. Happened twice in the Devils series in game 1. And even though New York dominates game 1 with 54 shots, 17 in the overtime, and Brian, you bang one right off the crossbar right before Greg Adams wins game 1. Guys behind the 8 ball again. Win game 2, albeit without some anxious moments in the final 10 seconds. Mike has to come up with another great save before, Brian, you score an empty net goal. And then in game 3, this is where the series really starts to flip in your favor. And Adam, I'll start with you. J.D. Wells really taking one for the team with taking a high stick from Pavel Bure. And this kind of opened the door. Even though Bure scored 63 seconds into the game, you guys got things settled. Wells takes the high stick, and by the end of the first period, you guys are up 2-1.
Yeah, and anytime, someone on the other team, and certainly one of the best players in the National Hockey League, and if you look at his career, Bure was a threat to score every time he was on the ice, and he could finish, but he was also, people don't realize how tough he was and how much of an edge he played with. And I think that when you look at the entire, I think, summation of his career, he was one of those scorers and skilled guys who wasn't a big guy, could absolutely fly on his skates, but he played with a real distinct edge. And certainly, when there's penalties for a reason, and when, the best player and a guy that is so dangerous like Bure can be every time he's on the ice, when he's taken out of the equation, it opens up a little bit of an opportunity. And certainly going into Vancouver and splitting in New York, we knew that, we had to at least hold serve, and then to be able to win both games and certainly go back home, up 3-1 was huge. But as a player and watching and being part of, and seeing Bure, obviously taking the major penalty, you're like, oh great, he's not going to be on the ice. You don't have to worry about him. But at the same token, they're there because they're a complete team. That's the best part of, National Hockey. That's the best part of hockey. You can have, there's lots of times where you can look to teams where one of their best players aren't in the lineup, and you know what, you have a tiger by the tail. You have an even stronger and team, and other guys step up. And for us, did it change the way we were going to play? No, but was it part of it? Oh, absolutely. That's all part of the game. And to say that didn't have an impact, I think it did. I mean, it's been a long time since I've actually talked about that. In fact, it's probably been a few decades since I even thought about that penalty. But certainly that was a big part of it for them. And if you ask them, they'd probably say that.
Well, that game ends up 5-1, and then in Game 4, Bure winds up having a major piece in this game as well. And certainly you, Brian, Vancouver gets out 2-0 in the first period. You get one back, and then you take down Bure and the penalty shot against Mike Richter. And Mark or Brian, was there any conversation with Mike heading into that penalty shot, knowing that during the All-Star game back during the winter, that Bure had tried the same move? Was there any discussion with him beforehand, or did you just leave Mike to his vices to deal with the situation on his own?
You can't talk to the goalie. I mean, he's gotten us that far, and he's having a heck of a year. But I knew if in my mind, if Bure was going to make a move, Mike was going to save it. I was worried he was going to go for the 5-hole, because Mike skates backwards so quick and he comes out so far. So I was worried about Pavel coming with speed and shooting 5-hole. But I said, if he goes for a deke, there's no way he's scoring. But I never said a word to Mike. Not till he's made the save.
Mark, what are you saying?
Yeah, the same thing. I think it's a little bit like trying to bring up a shutout in the dying seconds there. Even uttering the word shutout, it seems to be bad luck and change the outcome. So I think at that point there, you just leave the goalie to himself. He's well scouted before going into any series. I'm sure he's knows the players and their tendencies just like everybody else. So that's really kind of the epitome of a one-on-one battle. And the last thing you want to do is try to put some doubt or something else into what comes naturally to a goaltender at that point.
And Mike's one of our most prepared players anyway. He's mentally, he's as strong as anybody, if not more so, in that room. So when you're by yourself back there and you're preparing each and every day, you don't go mess that up in the Stanley Cup Finals.
And I don't know if you guys are aware that Mike had to be at his best because Vancouver had 10 power plays in Game 4. And fortunately, the last one in the game came late in the third period. And Brian, you set up Kovalev for a little chip over McLean's shoulder to score the go-ahead goal. And then Larmer with a carom, which I believe went off Dave Babych. And now, Neil, the team's walking off with a 3-1 lead, and you're within a game of winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and I'm walking off with a pair of Depends on with that penalty shot. I never forget that. That Vancouver press box in that old building, I don't know if you guys remember, it was up in the ceiling in that, what did they call that rink? I can't remember, but it was the original. Yeah. And I was up there on a catwalk watching that penalty shot and literally just praying. That's all as the manager, that's all you can do is pray. So I remember Steve Larmer's goal really well. And I remember Kovalev's goal because that ended up on Sega hockey cover. I think Kovalev, he was falling into McLean and the puck was going into the net. And Steve Larmer, I think it was shooting it into the zone and it went off of of Babych's skate and went behind Kirk McLean. But, of course, when you're up 3-1, in my mind, you're thinking, okay, teams down 3-1, it's really hard for them to come back. You're just trying to give yourself more confidence and hope. I'm sure everybody's relatives, Adam's family, Mark's family, Brian's family, and everybody else's are doing the same thing I'm doing, which is just hoping and praying and cheering and so on. Again, because as a manager after the trade deadline, you're basically just watching. Or a good manager should be just watching and not interfering with what's going on down there. Let the coaches do their thing and let the players do their thing and stay out of the way.
But there's so much distraction. You're coming back 3-1. You're coming into New York City, the expectations of ending a 54-year-old drought. And Mark, you had been this route before, 7 years earlier. And you're up 3-1 against Philadelphia, and the parade route is set, and you know what those distractions are. So you're reliving it again for the second time in 7 years.
Yeah, it's an incredible phenomenon in sports that is hard to explain. You'd think the team coming home for Game 5 would have all the momentum, but reality is there's probably more pressure on the team coming home than there is on the road team. The fact is that you do have to plan. There is a lot of things that need to be planned out and addressed for a team that's on the brink of winning a Stanley Cup. Now, the experience from a player's perspective is how do you compartmentalize those plans and make sure that you're not being distracted from the most important thing, which is to get ready to play the game to your best ability. And the fact is sometimes those distractions, although you try as hard as you can, do seep into your consciousness, and it is hard to not let it affect you. Now, that doesn't take anything away from Vancouver. As you said at the top of the show, Vancouver had a great team, and they were not finished. They, to a man and to a team, came into the Madison Square Garden for Game 5 with the intent on winning that game. And it's not like we played poorly, but maybe we did take our eye off the ball a little bit. That just allowed them to creep back into the series. And as you know, the margins for error at that time of year are so small, and you can just be off 2% and it's magnified. It's hard one to explain. Like you said, I'd lived it before, overcame it before, so I knew Game 6 was going to be a hard game to win because of all the momentum that they're carrying back all the way back to Vancouver and their fan base. And sure enough, it turned out to be a very tough game for us in Game 6. But we did have a chance to regroup with 2 days off before Game 7, and we're able to ultimately collect ourselves and push everything aside. Now that all the plans have been laid out already, we knew everything was safe. So, so we were all good for Game 7. All the plans had been laid to rest now. Now we just had to go and play.
I just want to skip back to Game 5 because certainly this may have had a little bit of a different outcome. And as the Tikkanen scores what appears to be the first goal of the game in the first period, and the play is ruled offside. And Adam, it's hard to put into words how that may have ultimately changed the outcome had that goal been allowed to stand and not been called back.
And again, we're going back 30 years, and yes, I do remember that, but I can't tell you exactly what I was thinking at the time, other than maybe I didn't agree with the call. But as Mark said, we're all human, and I can tell you that I had family members that came down for Game 5 that wouldn't return for Game 7. You had people that were wearing the same things every night of a game. The superstitious, repetitious type of stuff that everyone, and especially when it's family and friends, everyone takes ownership of your journey. And when you have a night like that where you're trying to close it out, we all obviously knew the weight of 54 years, and certainly knowing that Vancouver had done the same thing against Calgary in the first round when Bure scored in overtime in Game 7. With the same move that Mike had stopped previously in the series on the penalty shot. So for us, you knew there's going to be these small things that happen that you try to be resilient. And certainly in game 5, when they went up 3-0, and then we stormed back and scored 3 to match that, and it felt like the momentum was coming back to us. And then all of a sudden they scored 3 more, or whatever it was, 6-3, whatever the final score was. It was okay. Now we're back in it. Oh no, we're not back in it. And hey, guess what? We're getting on a plane and flying 6 hours back to the other coast. And at that point, you're dealing with a lot of other things physically and that too. So you have to kind of compartmentalize it all, and then try to get your head and your mind and your body. And certainly having the extra 2 days between 6 and 7 was huge for us, as Mess said, just to refocus and bring it back down to just the one game and back to what we needed to do to get past the Canucks.
Brian, in that fifth game, as Adam just mentioned, teams down 3-0, 1-0 headed to the third, 2 early goals in the third period, put them up 3. Lidster, Larmer, Mess within 5 minutes and 35 seconds. And the building is exploding. It's almost like the anticipation for the next goal is there. And it only took Babych 29 seconds to score. Did you ever feel that had there been a whistle at some point, just a stoppage in play to get everybody settled down, that may have made somewhat of a difference?
Not really about the whistle, but I can say, like, I when you brought up the Tikkanen offsides goal, I didn't remember that. But I remember Mess's goal. And I remember the building just like the roof about to come off. And I remember Babych's goal, and it wasn't anything fancy. Just a shot on the ice that somehow got by Mike and went, and I just couldn't believe it, because I went from thinking we're actually going to get this done right now, and I started thinking ahead, and then it was 4-3. But I don't think like changing the pace of the game or calling a whistle or calling a timeout or having, a break in the play would have really changed anything, because that building was ready to go, and Mess's goal was a huge goal, and we clawed our way back, and we believed in our team. But that was deflating for sure. And then I can't remember if the next goal went off my skate or if that was one of the first 3. But I know one of those goals in that game, and Mike had saved it. It hit my foot and went back in the net. But the third Mess's goal, and then Babych's goal was a huge flip in momentum, but I don't know if any type of stop and play would have changed anything at that point.
Mark, any sense on that?
Yeah, I don't actually. You're always looking for an edge anyway you can get one, whether it's a timeout or a delay game, or there's just so many ebbs and flows. And you've seen times where timeouts have worked, or stoppages, or have backfired. Coaches need to know their team and the mindset of the team, and strategically thinking, you can make some moves or do some things that help. But as far as, just a normal stoppage or whatever, it's just so hard to really say about what difference it would have made one way or another. As players, you're just trained to play the game. Coaches have to make in-game decisions that ultimately help or can hurt a team. For us as players, you can feel momentum at times leaving your side of the equation, and then you can feel when you have momentum on your side. You can feel the crowd. There's so many things that you can absorb as a player that all lead into the outcome of a game. But ultimately, what you train for and what you prepare for in those times is just really focus in on the moment and not get too far ahead of yourselves, and really just do what you're trained to do over and over and over again, and that's execute at the moment.
So now the 6-hour flight back to Vancouver, you guys are pretty flat, even though it's a 1-0 game or it's a 2-1 game headed into the third period. Never felt like you guys were 2 goals away from winning the Stanley Cup. So you're coming back for Game 7, and several of our guests that we've had on the first couple of shows that we've done have shared that Mike Keenan wanted to divert the return flight to New York to someplace outside of the city to take the distraction away. And Mark, was it you that kind of told him, no, let's embrace the moment and, let's face this thing head on?
Well, I don't think that he wanted to. I think he posed a question to the leadership group about what we should do. Did he think, or did we think that going to Lake Placid would be a good thing for us to really take those 2 days and refocus and come back? And I think to a man, certainly for myself and Brian and Kevin and all the folks that and Gravy, we felt that why do something different than we had done all year? We had really played well at home. We were comfortable at home. We were comfortable going back to our families, sleeping in our own beds, and just really absorbing all of the energy that was around that moment. That's, as a player, is what you live for. You don't shy, or you shouldn't, in my opinion, shy away from that moment in any way, whether it's through the press or through the city or the town or your local schools where your kids are going to school, or they're your local grocer, or that's cheering you on and signs outside. I mean, all of that, in my opinion, plays into the whole moment. And for us, I think it was a unanimous decision. Let's just go home and let's just do what we've done all year. And we had a couple of great practices. We, of course, were immersed with the press, which was great. I think as a player, you need to talk about it, and in a way that relieves some of the tension and pressure that you can have building up. Allow yourself to look at both sides, whether, if you're imagining losing, what that would feel like. I think that's healthy. And then imagine what it would feel like to win and see yourself skating around the Stanley Cup. But as you get closer to the game time, the most important thing is that all the negative things start to disappear, and you're getting filled up with all the positive things that you relied on your whole career. So for us, it was the right move. We had the right team to absorb that kind of momentum and that energy that was surrounding us. And Mike made the right call, and we came back to New York.
Yeah, and on top of it, the Knicks were in the same position we were, and playing in the NBA Finals. So New York City, the energy that was there, to not be a part of that, on your day off and watch another team go through it. And, we were in our own beds, like Mark said, and, you were comfortable in your surroundings. So the energy in that city between the two teams at that time of year was great to be a part of.
Adam, you sensing the same thing?
100%. Well, that's the benefit, and certainly why you want home ice is so that you are sleeping in your own bed. You have the comfort, and at the same time you have your own facilities, because there's a lot of preparation, and certainly for us, because we were a banged up team, there's a lot of preparation that had to take place in the 2 days in between. And for us, you want to be in your city, and as Leetch said, that's the part that people don't realize, just the energy in the city. And whether you're going to a gas station to get gas, or the local businesses, you'd see, Ranger stickers or banners or flags or what have you. Everyone was in tune to our run and what we were trying to accomplish. So for me, it really impacted you in a positive way, even when you weren't at the Gardner, we weren't at Playland, practice, and we weren't at the facility. It just had for me. It was all part of the strength that you needed to win after 54 years, and I think we garnered a lot of energy and a lot of strength from our base and our bigger Ranger contingency in New York.
Neil, how you holding up?
I'm just trying to hold my own family together at the time. My mother, and who is probably the biggest hockey fan on the face of the earth, and the biggest Ranger fan, probably, even though she didn't start out that way. I got to be honest with you. Those 2 days in between, and I had so much confidence in this group that they were going to do it. They never let us down ever, the whole season, ever. So they weren't going to do it now. And that was from my heart. I knew that. And then in my head, I knew that we were a better team. And in evaluating, which is what I was supposed to be doing as a scout and as a manager, is evaluating. And when I evaluated our player personnel compared to the other teams, I just knew we had more experience. We had just a better team. And the other thing I want to add is, I was speaking to Glenn Anderson the other day about this. I said, that people talk about all the Oilers that were on that team. And I said, that didn't happen by accident. That was by design. And it was by design because they were available and they were winners. And if you've got winners that are available, you got to get them on your team, in my opinion. It just happened that I was fortunate enough that I was able to make the deals to bring first Gravy. It was the first one, actually. And then Mark came about a month or two later. And then we went on. Babych came, and then Tikkanen came, and Kevin Lowe and Craig McTavish, and then Glenn Anderson at the deadline. And without every single one of those guys, and by the way, every single player down to Mike Hartman and Eddie Olczyk and everybody else. I mean, we wouldn't have won that cup. So that everybody was important, but it was, you knew going into Game 7 that you had Kevin Lowe, obviously Mess, but you also had Kevin Lowe and Tikkanen and McTavish, who had been the captain of Edmonton that season. You had all those guys in your room. And, not to mention, we haven't even mentioned Steve Larmer, who, I mean, as the manager, I had great confidence in the group that they would get it done.
Well, we're going to tackle Game 7 right after a word from our sponsor. Game 7 has a magic attached to it like nothing in sport. In order to prevail, teamwork is essential to achieving success. At the Game 7 group, transforming individuals into cohesive teams is the core philosophy in their team building approach. Their belief is every team has potential to achieve extraordinary results. Game 7 group offers various services to help teams accomplish their goals through specific team building events, coaching, and speaking engagements. These services are aimed at improving team dynamics, productivity, and overall performance. Face it, we all want to be able to succeed in the big moment. Check out the Game 7 Group website at game7group.com/NHL wraparound to learn more. Right now, a special incentive offer awaits our podcast listeners. Take your team to the next step. The Game 7 Group will get you there. Welcome back to NHL Wraparound 1990 Forever. This one will last a lifetime, and joined by my partner, Neil Smith, and Adam Graves, Brian Leetch, and Captain Mark Messier. June 14th, 1994. And Mark, as I said earlier in the show, there had only been 2 7th games in the Stanley Cup Finals since 1971. And you had played in both of them, and you were an Edmonton native, and you had won 3 of the first 4 with the Oilers in 87, lost games 5 and 6, came back and won Game 7. And the same script is playing out here. Can you equate the pressure of what you experienced in your hometown, Edmonton, and now your adopted city of New York?
Basically, we had lost a year before. In 86, we're on our way to our 3rd cup in a row, and Calgary was able to beat us to knock us off, and that was a tough pill to swallow. So we came back the next year with a real purpose to get back and to win another Stanley Cup. It was noticeable from the time of training camp started all the way up and through the regular season until we were able to get back into the playoffs. Losing Game 5, losing Game 6, and then coming home to a strong, hungry, young Philadelphia team. And just having the confidence that we had to play our game. If we just executed and played our game, we were a better team. We had thought that even though Hextall was playing great, that we knew we were going to get great goaltending. And if we did play our best was better than their best. That was our simple mindset going into in 1987. If we play our best and execute the way we're supposed to, we win the game. It wasn't easy because belief is a strong emotion, and Philadelphia believed they could win that game. We found the same thing in 1994, exactly the same scenario. Although we missed the playoffs the year before, which also gave us a renewed sense of purpose going into the 94 season. We made some changes that allowed us to get back to that to the playoffs in the following year, and then of course overcoming New Jersey, and then getting into the Stanley Cup Finals against another big, strong, well-coached, hungry team that was taking it to us physically. But again, the same thing. We felt again that if we played our best and they played their best, we're a better team. And so the focus becomes very crystal clear as an individual and as a team. Let's go out and execute like we've done all year long. Every time that we needed to win a big game that year, we're able to do it there. We had the experience, we had the goaltending, we had the star power, we had Brian, we had Zubov, Kovalev, Larmer. We had all the experience we needed. in the dressing room to keep everybody's focus where it should be. And when the game started, with all the hoopla and everything going on that was surrounding that Game 7, our team was incredibly focused in and doing what we needed to do to win the game, and that was just take it as the old proverbial shift at a time and not get too far ahead of ourselves.
But there was a little bit of a sidebar story going on heading into the 7th game. And there had been rumors that Mike Keenan was starting to negotiate his way out of New York and may sign with Detroit at the time. And he has this passionate speech leading up into Game 7. Mark, we've heard your account of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know where you're going with it, and it is true. But I can tell you, Vic, at that particular moment, as a player, there are a million distractions throughout the year, and what you try to do is get rid of all the distractions, whether it's malcontent or players not playing enough or wanting to play on a power play or family lives or there's a million distractions, and you spend the whole entire year trying to make sure that everybody's in a good place mentally for when you get to the playoffs and everybody's completely focused on the same goal, which is trying to win the Stanley Cup. So as a player, there could have been, Mike could have signed on to do 10 billion different things that wouldn't have mattered to us as players. We didn't take it as he was selling out. We didn't look at it as it was a distraction in any way whatsoever. Whatever he was going to do at the end of the season that was his decision. Just like it is. We're all big boys. We all have decisions to make in life, whether it's professionally or individually or personally. That didn't affect us one bit. He did come in and make a great speech and told us we were the best team in hockey, and we were. And this is a great moment that you should all really, like Gravy was saying, you should take this and really absorb every second of it, because this might never happen again to you the rest of your career, whether you're an older guy, younger guy, and not shy away from the moment. Like, you're the best team in hockey for a reason, because you've proven it over 7.5 months. Now you got to go out and win a game. Well, you should have all the confidence that you're able to go out and win that game because of what you have accomplished together all year long. And that was the message. And I think it was well received by everybody. And of course, all the things about Mike and history and benching Brian and all the things that we've come to know about, Mike and the way he coached a team and all that. Stuff happens in teams. And you got to be tough enough mentally and physically to overcome it. It's not easy to win a Stanley Cup because there are many hurdles to overcome. We just happen to have guys with an incredible amount of character and incredible amount of experience to be able to overcome everything that was thrown at us. And as you know, when you play in a market the size of New York City and all the history that we're reminded of every step of the way, if you start to let little things trickle into your dressing room, into your consciousness there, then it will become a distraction. We had to stay focused on what we're able to do to make us successful as a team, as individuals and as a team. And because of the experience, because of the trades that Neil was able to make and bring in guys like Kevin and Larmer and McTavish and Bukaboom and Adam and all the guys that had Glenn Anderson and all the guys that had gone down these road warriors, these grizzled veterans that were tough as nails. You talk about being tough, getting tough guys into your lineup like Noonan and Mateau to match all the skill of our young guys. It was an incredible blend. So we were not afraid of the moment, and we were focused. So anything could have happened on our team, and we would have been able to absorb it, dispel it, and then keep our focus in on the task at hand that year.
And it was mentioned earlier, the 2 days off in between games 6 and 7, and probably also finishing those first 2 rounds in only 9 games. You guys had just enough in the tank here. You can see from the outset that in game 7, the team had a little bit extra jump. And Brian, you scored the first goal of the game on a great setup from Mark and Sergei Zubov.
Yeah, I thought, I learned the years before that if Mark's got the puck going up the wall, you make sure you hustle up there. And if you're open, you're going to get that puck back. So he had gone up that side. I thought that I would get up there with him. Once he didn't give it to me on the forehand and he went backhand to Zubov, I was going to bail. And then I'm like, their team was like even with me. And I'm like, Zubov just may well pass to me and I may have an open net. And sure enough, he had one of the best shots on our team, certainly as a defenseman. And he should have probably ripped it, but gives me a little bunny layup, and Gravy's got the whole front of the net taken out. So all I got to do is just feed it into the empty net. But it was, it was a big goal for our team to get that lead. The building could exhale a little bit, and it just helped, reaffirm our preparation and everything for that Game 7.
Less than 4 minutes later, Adam, you'd been struggling to score throughout the final, and Zubov again starts to play Kovalev, and you're all alone in the slot, and you bury one past McLean. And in the celebration, you could see Mark is telling you something. Do you recall what he was saying? Just, that monkey was off the back. Finally, we're on the score sheet, and it's a 2-0 lead.
Yeah, I'd like to say I remember, but I'm a hockey player, so I've been hitting the board a few times. And in that run, I will tell you that we're all banged up, and that's the best part of the journey, right? It's the sacrifices made both physically and mentally, but you want to contribute. And it's a group of guys that I don't know as if I ever played on, and in fact, I know I never played on a team closer. And 30 years in the memories, we'll tell you that was a gift, that gift of being allowed to go into that locker room. And you talk about the journey and the humor, even going into Game 7. Yes, everyone was serious, but one of our greatest strengths as a hockey club was how close the guys were, but how funny our locker room was people don't talk enough about the Healy's and the Kyprios. We talk about it, but other people and Mike, you couldn't wait to get to the rink. So when you have people that you literally love like family, you don't want to let them down. And I knew that that part of what I have to bring was not only physically but finishing too. And when Alex sent that over, and instead of going glove side, I ended up going stick side, and luckily enough it found the back of the net. But like always, and Brian said it earlier. Playing alongside Mark, what made him great is other people's achievements meant more than his own. He cheered other people's successes more than he cheered his own, and that was a special bond that we all had.
And you could certainly see it in that celebration after your goal. So take a 2-0 lead into the second period. Trevor Linden scores on a delayed penalty, partial breakaway, and then you guys go back on the power play. And Brian, you scored. Adam, you scored. Mark, you score.
Our power play had been great all year. And as Gravy had mentioned numerous times, it was one of the greatest weapons that we had as a team. Do you think about two Hall of Fame defensemen on the point, manning the power play, and then Gravy in front of the net, and just the amount of talent with Kovalev and Larmer. And so we were super confident that if we got some opportunities at some point in the series, especially in that Game 7, that if we had a power play, we're going to score a goal. I will say that to this day there, I think Noonan scored that goal. I've asked the NHL many times to look at it and review it and to change it and give it to him because it really does, belong to his family legacy, if you will. And we had said early in the year, we had a conversation about, goals and assists, and we had a very frank conversation that let's not be going to the referees and changing goals and assists, because it doesn't really matter who scores. If we score, we all score, especially in those moments there. So hopefully at some point in our lifetimes that they will overturn that and make sure that Brian Noonan gets credit for that goal.
Mike Richter makes a great save on Cliff Ronning at the side of the net, 2-pad stack with about 5 minutes left in the second. So now you're carrying a 3-1 lead, the dreaded 2-goal lead into the third period. Neil, what's going on in the suite upstairs, way above Madison Square Garden?
I'm a couple of stories above Mike Richter, as we said in the podcast when he was on. again, you're pretty confident at the time. And I mean, my confidence didn't wane in the team, even going into the second overtime period against New Jersey, when Brian had scored that great spinorama goal, and then Zelepukin tied it up. And so, you know what, going into the third period up 3-1, it was great. I knew it wasn't over, obviously. But you had just enormous amount of confidence in these players. You'd seen them play all 7 months, like Mark said. The other thing that I did do, though, was I told Al Young, who is unfortunately departed now, but was a great guy at MSG and the head of security. And I said to him, if we're winning with 5 minutes to go, or I don't know what I said, 3 minutes to go, I said, please come up and get me and break me down to where my mom's sitting. And so I was thinking about that too between periods, quite honestly, that if we were holding the lead, I had to quickly get down in the elevator and get over to where they were sitting, which was about 5 rows behind the bench.
Carry the 3-1 lead into the third period. Tikkanen takes Bure down, and then Trevor Linden scores his second goal of the game. And I think for Ranger fans in the building that night, the chill that came over, because you are really at the intersection of the greatest thrill and the greatest tragedy you can imagine in sports. So when Linden scores, what's the sense on the bench? Because the crowd try to get you back into it, but the reality is you've got 15 minutes and 10 seconds to kill here.
Yeah, I'll just say that you just described that as probably what made the '94 Stanley Cup so special. The intersection of tragedy and that incredible jubilation that everybody had waited 54 years for, and it was on the balance for those last few minutes, especially when they made it 3-2 and then we had to kill a penalty. And on top of it, we had allowed a few late goals in series before that, which even was playing into a part of it. And that's what I'm talking about as far as manifesting the energy. And it does play a part in those crucial moments. And you could feel, exactly to your point, that there was a little bit of a breath that was taken by the entire crowd, that, oh boy, is this here again? Is this going to really happen to us after 54 years? Are those ghosts and those demons that strong that this is the way it's going to go down again? I mean, and that's what, when you look, here we are 30 years later talking about it, that is what we had to overcome. And you got to be willing to stare down the barrel and face it head on. And, we were confident that we could, but, and at the time, I don't think as a player, once the puck was dropped, that you're thinking that, but I would think that every player probably felt that energy shift for that moment that you're talking about. And then you got to quickly dispel it. But, yeah, it's there's no, like Gravy said it best, there's no linear road to the Stanley Cup. You are going to face some adversity at times, and you have to be able to overcome it. And we were able to in '94, which was never easy.
And Brian, right after Linden's goal, Nathan Lafayette has a pretty good shot from the slot, and Craig McTavish makes a great skate-to-stick play to get the puck cleared. And then I know this is out of market, and I don't have any Iron City beer here, and you'll know where I'm going with this, because it was Kevin Lowe with the post with 9 minutes left. And then 2.5 minutes later, Martin Jelena hits the outside of the post with seemingly a wide open net. And then probably the greatest heart stopper was Lafayette again, got one over Richter's glove and banged one off the post. So Brian first, then Adam, what's going through your head here? As Brian, you had even said, every time I looked at the clock, it looked like they were adding time.
Yeah, but the good thing was I was going on every other shift, so I didn't have to look at the clock too much. But I just felt playing with the lead, it's more comfortable. Like if one of those goes in, now you're tied, and then someone can be the hero again on your team. So there's that little bit of a cushion of being out there playing. If you make a mistake, you're not costing your team the whole series or costing yourself, a game 7. So that 3-2 lead, and mentally for me, it was big, and just going out there and trying to do your job. But when you're sitting on the bench and you watch pucks ringing off the post, or, plays around and scrambles, you are thinking, like Mess said, this can't happen again. Like, we've already made it this far. But when you're out there playing, it's still just hockey, and it makes it easier. But sitting on that bench is hard. You looked up and you felt like you had a minute shift, and you probably had a 30-second shift, and you watch another 30, and then you're back out there again. So, but the 1-goal lead was always reassuring at that point.
Adam, you feeling the same way?
Oh, I say this all the time, that might have been certainly the last 2 minutes were maybe the longest 2 minutes in the history of the National Hockey League, with all those icings and the last 15 minutes. And it couldn't have, it couldn't have gone any other way. And for those that have had the I guess availability to watch Oh Baby, which was a VHS tape, I don't want to date us, but we're not getting any older. And you look at when they scanned the crowd for that game, how nervous everyone was, and the way they're sitting, you can just see that the intensity was at a completely different level. And as Brian said, the best place to be was on the ice and in the thick of it, and going on and off the bench, because for me, that was the most relaxed place in the building, because everywhere else, it was pins and needles, and certainly the way that entire last 2 minutes went with all the icings, and but it couldn't have happened any other way after 54 years and all these stories and how things had transpired and where teams, arrange your history of the Rangers and where things had happened, that the curse, all this other stuff. That's the only way this game could have ended, was the way it did. And certainly Vancouver, hats off to them. They went right to the last drop of the puck, and they were full marks for the way they played.
And certainly Kevin Collins not getting any Christmas cards later that year for a couple of those icing calls that were made in the final minute. So, Neil,
that is another example of the way it had to be to create that drama of the tragedy and the incredible jubilation. It was just meant to be that way.
And Neil, you're already now behind the bench with your mom and your wife, and now it comes to the finale. And Mark, you've always spoken so much about attention to detail, and even on that very last face-off, McTavish spins probably a little early to neutralize Bure from getting the puck. You step into the circle, you lay the wood on Bure, and he tries to slash back. And even Steve Larmer, and we joked with him when he appeared on one of our episodes that he still has Jeff Brown pinned in the corner behind the net. And the buzzer goes, the waiting is over. The New York Rangers are Stanley Cup champions, and this one will last a lifetime.
And it has. It's lasted 30 years to this point, and it never gets. We never get tired. I never get tired talking about it. To this day, reminded daily, whether I'm on a subway or a taxi or in this New York City, about someone that had their own experience. But it galvanized so many different people and so many family members and boys and fathers and daughters and mothers and aunts and uncles, and the reach that it had we know the reach that it had now after this many years, and I think that's what kind of transcended hockey. We've said it before. It was big. It became bigger than hockey. It became bigger than a sport. Became a story, a human interest story in so many different ways. And because of it, and because of the way we won, and because of the character that we had on our team, and because of the immersion that we had as a team in the community for the Ranger fan base, the approachability from the players, I think added to the whole experience. And, we all made amazing relationships through it all, not only as teammates and team personnel that live on to this day, but fans alike. And here we are again on this podcast talking about it because it was incredibly special for so many different reasons.
Brian, you become the first American to win the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. Could you put into words just when you heard the announcement from Gary Bettman that you were going to be the recipient?
I guess at the time, it's kind of a little embarrassing because of how much the team worked together to get to that point. And Mark has said it, Adam has said it, what our relationships meant inside that locker room, all the trainers, the guys that didn't get as much ice time and what they meant to our team. All of that went into us all about to lift the Stanley Cup and take that photo. So to be pulled out of the group, to be singled out at the time was something I felt uncomfortable with. And I asked Mark about it on the ice and said, can the whole team come up there? He goes, no, this is how they do it. Get up there, take your photo, and we'll get the cup. And I said, okay. So I went up, I picked it up. That was the only time I held the trophy until we got to the parade route, and I had to take some photos with it then. But obviously looking back on it, and certainly even into the summer, being the first American-born player was something that I am proud of and became more and more special to me as your career goes on. But at the time, it was all about what we just accomplished in New York and how we did it together. And you can see, you've got Gravy yelling 1940 into the cameras, everybody's hugging, like all the video, Mark's jumping up and down, like all the hugs and, the different emotions that go through it. So the longer you're away from your career, the more proud you are of that accomplishment. But at the time, it was an afterthought.
Adam, you would scream that into the camera that year 1940 would never have to be heard again. And of course, it was also the sign, wondering if you had seen it in the stands, the "Now I Can Die in Peace," because that is certainly what a lot of Ranger fans felt that night and still feel to this day.
Well, in 3 short years, and for Leetch, it was probably 5 years, where you're hearing it everywhere you go, 1940. In fact, it was top of mind for everyone because in the stands that night, Ranger fans chanted 1940, I believe, when we were being presented with the Stanley Cup. So it was and that was the interesting part, because when Mark came joined us after the trade, and it was actually after the game against Boston, and then Mark joined us in Montreal the following day, game 2 of that 91-92 season. One of the cultural changes that took place was that Mark started, we have to talk about where we want to be. We want to be Stanley Cup champions, and just changed for me the culture and the mindset. But one of the reminders that you always had was the fear of 54 years or fear of 53 or 52. Don't talk about it, and it became such a big part of where we wanted to be. And not necessarily so they didn't chant 1940 ever again, but it kind of represented that journey. And certainly, as we talked about, all the things that happened along the way, and the last 2 minutes of Game 7 and against the Devils, and going into it had to happen for me. It had to happen that way. But it was top of mind for everyone. It wasn't just me. As I said, our Garden faithful were chanting that after we won. So it was something that you didn't enjoy on the road, and it was something that you like. It was like, okay, let's put that behind all of us. But just speaking to what Brian and Mark said, it's been an incredible gift, and something that you look back and you say, how lucky was I and my family and the people you love to be a part of that, and to do it with people you respect so greatly, and whether and everyone's off in different places in that. But we're always, we'll always remain just as close and tied together. And like I said, it was a gift to be a part of that.
Neil, you made history. Brian was already with the club when you arrived in 1990, and then you brought Adam on in 91, and then Mark, and all the building, all the acquisitions, it paid off, and even had a club with the first 4 Russians ever to have their name on the Stanley Cup: Zubov, Kovalev, Nemchinov, and Karpovtsev. So for you to now be the only GM to lead the Rangers to the Cup in 84 years, 30 years later, it still has to resonate the same way.
Well, just like the guys said, I mean, it actually gets bigger as time goes on. I think, in the 90s, after we had won, was probably the worst time for me, because everybody wanted to do it again. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like it took so much to do it once. I'm not sure. And, the 2 things that I'm known most for in my life is the Stanley Cup in 94 and recognizing a good deal in my personal life. Everybody jokes with me about the Costco guy and all this stuff, but those 3 guys that are on this show today, I got there and was blessed with the fact that Brian Leetch was already there. He just won the Calder Trophy. And we also had this young goalie, Mike Richter, who hadn't quite made it yet because Bob Froese and John Van Beesbroek were on the team. But I knew how good he was because I'd seen him play. And those guys were already there. And then we had some other really good players that were great assets that were already there in 89, 90, like Tony Granato and Thomas Sandstrom and Ulf Dahlin. But then when I got the opportunity to get other pieces, and we've mentioned most of them, but you recognize a good deal. And, when Glenn calls me and says, are you interested in Messier? And I'm like, well, of course I am. Like, I'm not an idiot. And then I was going to make that happen if I could make it happen. The thing was with Glenn, and Mark knows this, is that you couldn't trust him that he was really being serious and that he wasn't going to somehow, swap some horse trading on you. So I ended up actually signing Gravy, and that pissed off Glenn to no end that I did that. And he said in the paper, well, maybe he doesn't really want to get Mark, because he went and screwed me and signed Gravy. And I told the reporter, I said, I'm not even sure that I can get Mark. I know that I can get Graves. So I'm doing what I can do at the moment that I can do it. And again, I knew a good deal because that was Troy Millette for Adam Graves. I don't think anybody would doubt that deal. No disrespect to Troy Millette either. But anyway, all those acquisitions, I was lucky, and I was also able to recognize a good deal. And I was lucky too that, as Mark has said many times, I started out with a winning organization that won the Stanley Cup twice. I was a very small part of it when I was with the Islanders. Neither time did they beat the Oilers, by the way, when I was there. We beat Minnesota and we beat Vancouver in 82. And then I went on to the Red Wings. But those 2 years of watching Al Arbour and Bill Torrey and how management works and what your expectations should be of the players and the culture that they had built there. Mark came to the Rangers, and I said it at the press conference in the Montreal Forum, that he would change the culture of the Rangers. And you might not see it in that logo that's behind me, but it'll be a little bit different if you know what to look for. And I was right ever since Mark got there. And to this day, that logo is a little bit different for him having been there and helping all of us change the culture of what it meant to be a Ranger. Again, I was just really fortunate. I had a great foundation there with Brian Leetch and Mike Richter, and just able to add to it from there. But that the moment that the buzzer goes and you're out there and you're thinking, did I really do this? Is this really happening? And but of course, it was just it's you can't even put it into words what the feeling is.
One more piece to fill in at the back end, and we're going to get to the parade right after this from MyGray.
Time now for a quick shout out to our sponsor. NHL Wraparound is brought to you by MyGray, your source for game-worn jerseys. Head to mygray.com to get your collection started today. Get real, Get it from MyGray. NHL wraparound subscribers can take 10% off any hockey jersey when they order at mygray.com and use the coupon code WRAP10. Don't forget that coupon code WRAP10.
Welcome back to NHL Wraparound. The New York Rangers have won the Stanley Cup and now the parade. And Mark, going to start with you that at the beginning of the season, Keenan showed the New York Mets parade from 1969, and now it has come full circle and you're actually living it. It's got to have been even better than imagined.
Yeah, I think Mike coming into training camp that year did the right thing. He set the expectations that we're here for one reason only, and that's to win. So how are we going to do it? What's the game plan? What's the vision? How are we going to go about doing something that hadn't been done at this point now in 54 years? But just the fact that setting the expectations for the players, that anything less than this would not be acceptable. And this is early September. Now we got to go on this journey together to figure out how we're going to go about that. So I think, and Mike said it many times over, the only reason why he showed the 1986 Mets is because they didn't have any footage of the 1940 Rangers to show us what it was like for the 1940 Rangers with the parade. So, but the visual was there, the Canyon of Heroes, the ticker tape parade, the players on the floats. I mean, that was ingrained into everybody's, and that could be you, I think, was the most important aspect of it. And then on from a player's perspective, going to the parade, now you're talking about witnessing and feeling the fan base that had waited so long, that came out to support the players, and in some way try to share their own personal connection with the team, and whether it's through a grandfather or their father or themselves or whatever. It was an incredibly emotional parade for something of that size and magnitude because of the feelings that went into that Stanley Cup. So as a player, you could feel that. You could feel that even though it was incredibly, I don't know, they say sometimes 2 million people. I don't know what the final number was, but it was too many to count, let's put it that way. And as far as you could see, there were people from buildings to street levels, from blocks to the sides, to the flanks. But it was just a testimony to the franchise, the history, and to that team, which, I think, in my perspective anyways, really lent themselves to the community and immersed themselves into the fan base's own connection to the team, which just elevated the whole experience for us and the fans. And that parade was a culmination of that.
Brian, for you, had to be one of the most enormous moments in your life.
The parade for me is kind of unexplainable. Like, I'm not smart enough. I don't have a good enough vocabulary to tell you what a feeling it was. It was so special. We should probably get our friend Al Troutwig to write some kind of little promo for it, because you need a professional to kind of explain how cool it was and just how different it was, and to share it with your teammates. Our families were on the different floats with us, and it was over in the blink of an eye. We always talk about going around the block and come back and doing it again, but special moment.
Adam, how about for you? The trip on the floats and then stopping off at City Hall to be honored.
Much like Brian Leetch just said, it's hard to put into words. I think the one part that for me might be a little bit different than Stanley Cups or championships celebrated for me, and it's certainly being at the parade. You know what it means to the players, you know what it means to the coaches and the managers and to the organization. But the same feeling we had was the same feeling, as Mark said, generations of families of Ranger fans. They had the same, love and feeling, and they were on the journey with us, maybe more so than than in my opinion, than you would in other sports and other things that have taken place. Like it's a special bond that the New York Rangers have with their fans, and never was it more celebrated. And it's hard to put into words than that day in New York and the parade and it, as Leetch said, it went too quickly. But just amazing. And you look back and it's like almost surreal. I was part of that. You know, I was lucky enough to stand on that float alongside my brothers and having family. And I mean, it was an incredible gift. And we get reminded every day, all the time, and happily, I will tell you.
And Neil, we're going to wrap with you that you had made the point that after the Cup win on June 14th, no arrests, parade, no arrests, and what a statement about New Yorkers that they could have celebrated the way they did after 54 years and still keep it all together and just make the joyous occasion the best thing that it could possibly be.
There was just, as these guys have said, there was so much love in the air, and there was no arrests. I mean, imagine that. Like, I can't even imagine that now, that there wasn't any arrest. There wasn't anything bad come out of this. I mean, it wasn't like we saw it the year before in Montreal. My God, it was horrible. But I'm very proud of New York. I'm proud to be a New Yorker. I'm proud to have been able to represent the New York Rangers for 11 years. And I'm proud to be a New Yorker. And I think one of the things that these guys don't know, because I don't know that I've ever made it public, was that I went up to Giuliani's office after the City Hall thing, and I started crying. And I really did. I was bawling. And I said to him, I said, you know, I just wanted to make New York happy, the Ranger fans happy. I wanted to make them happy. And I was crying because it was so emotional for me, because that I knew that my work in my role in this whole thing and my work had made so many New Yorkers happy. And that was very emotional for me. It wasn't about me now being on the Stanley Cup. It was more about I had helped in delivering the Ranger fans this enormous gift that was going to make them so happy. And I know we all hear this all the time. When you meet a Ranger fan, the only words they say right away is thank you. They all say thank you, like as if you gave them this tremendous gift. And so when you talk about emotion, it's hard to describe that parade. It was over before it started. But I do remember that. And Rudy Giuliani looked at me and went, well, you did it. Like, why are you crying? You did it. But I think these guys can understand how emotional it is to be able to give 7 million people or whatever it is, something that they didn't even think was possible.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. And every year, the legend grows a little bit further. Neil, Adam, Brian, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today and taking this down, this incredible trip down memory lane of the 1994 Rangers Stanley Cup Championship. Thank you to our sponsors. And we will have one more show coming up in our series, and that will be Reflection, as team members, the media, and fans share how 1994 impacted their lives. We will see you then.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.